You know your coworker is about to be laid off. You also know they're about to buy a very expensive house. Your boss tells you not to say anything. What is the ethical thing to do? In a business ethics class I once took, the official answer was, you say nothing. Most people think ethics is about knowing the right answer. But this scenario, it doesn't ask what you believe. It asks what you're willing to live with. So way back in the day when I was in college, I had to take a business ethics class. And in this class, I was presented with a problem. And the problem was, who gets to be harmed by a situation in which a layoff happens? And the teacher was very adamant. You keep the secret and you let your coworker buy that house even though you know after being laid off they couldn't afford it. Well, I sat in class and I was kind of flabbergasted because this coworker of mine would be much more harmed by the layoff than the company would be harmed by me letting the cat out of the bag. So after class, when everybody was filing out of the room, I approached the teacher. And I said, I don't agree with your position on this issue. And the teacher got very upset. I don't think the teacher was used to students coming up and confronting them about anything in the class. Frankly, it was a pass-fail class, so I don't think that they were expecting pushback on the issue. And the professor got very angry and asked me for my name, and I refused to give my name. And the teacher was very close, I feel, to throwing me out of the class. And certainly, if I had provided my name, the teacher would have given me an instant fail. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I genuinely thought not warning the coworker was an ethical failure. So the teacher didn't engage with me, didn't have a discussion about the merits of both sides of the issue. The teacher was very clear in the class that confidentiality is an ethical issue, that institutional trust has to exist in order for the business to operate. In this situation, I wasn't in a position of power. I wasn't a decision maker. I was simply an employee with some information. And not only that, but consider this. Would it be considered to be favoritism if I let the employee know that they're about to be laid off and not tell anybody else? So from a business ethics standpoint, her answer makes sense. If ethics is about protecting systems, protecting the business. But my point of view was, at what point does silence become participation? In other words, harm is going to be done to this coworker. My silence is a form of participation in that harm. And if harm is foreseeable and preventable, does loyalty still apply? loyalty to the business, that is. And is ethics about rules or responsibility? That's an interesting question because, in my view, ethics is all about responsibility, a responsibility to each other. And from our responsibility to each other, there is an establishment of rules, but the responsibility comes first. So I was confronting a teacher who spoke from a position of authority about an ethical problem that involves authority and the pressure to just take her word for it. And by extension, the pressure of taking the boss's order to stay silent about it as something I needed to obey. I needed to obey the teacher. And the teacher said I had to obey my boss. That, to me, wasn't a solid ethical situation because the system remains clean by outsourcing the harm to individuals. And in this case, the harm was to my coworker who was about to buy that very expensive house. And through my complicit silence, harm that coworker. So the real question isn't, should I break the rules? It's, who am I willing to let get hurt so I can keep my hands clean? And there's really no consequence-free answer. Either the business is damaged by me telling my coworker prematurely that they've been laid off, or I hurt my coworker by not giving him very important information that would keep them from buying that expensive house and thus possibly damaging their lives for years to come. Listen, ethics doesn't promise safety. Ethics often costs something. You have to decide who bears the cost, and that cost could also be for yourself. By informing the coworker that they've been laid off, would it cost me my job? Would I be able to live with that consequence? So there's no real keeping my hands clean in this issue. Could I get thrown out of the class and fail the class by confronting the teacher about my misgivings over this ethical scenario? What did I accomplish by confronting the teacher? Obviously not much. The teacher was dedicated to their answer. My trying to change the teacher's mind on this issue could have cost me credits for that quarter for that class. A class that, by the way, was required for my degree. But I felt it important to bring up the issue, despite the fact that it might make my teacher very angry at me. Of course, I didn't realize exactly how angry, how dedicated to their position the teacher was. But still, I could have backed off. I could have apologized. I could have gone my way and taken the pass in the pass-fail class. I felt strongly about the issue and about the fact that this teacher was possibly influencing the behaviors of other students in the class who might actually have to make a decision like this in the future. I felt it was important to say something respectfully, but the teacher didn't take it as respectful. What bothered me wasn't that my professor disagreed with me. It was that disagreement itself was treated as unethical. Was it? So this channel is about what happens to ethics when authority, fear, or pressure tells us not to ask questions. And I thought I'd introduce the channel with my first video, telling you about a scenario I went through where there was pressure not to ask questions, but I did anyway. What would you do?